Welcome to another Whisper Talk book review for the 8th book I've read of the year. Let me show you what it was. Under the Tulip Tree by Shocklee. I read this book quite a while ago, so I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little fuzzy, but I do remember how I felt when I read this, if that makes sense. It's about Lorena Leland, they call her Raina, and on her 16th birthday is when the stock market crashed and the Great Depression began, and her father was a banker, and it was found he did some shady dealings, so their life was very affected, but not as affected like others. They still had their house, their mother got a little job, and their grandmother, their mother's mother, supported them, paid their mortgage, things like that. Raina has a sister who is married with children. Her father became a drunk, holed himself up in a study, and her mother got a little job, if I recall, at like a little sewing shop. And Raina is trying to bring in some money, and she joins the Federal Writers Project, which is writing the stories of former slaves and recording their experiences. And this fulfills both the need for income, but also that she wanted to be a writer. Raina was selected to be one of the writers for the Federal Writers Project, and she is assigned a former slave to record her story. And every day, another writer, Alden, drives her to where she has to go. And immediately, the first person who Raina is assigned is named Frankie Washington. And there is an immediate connection. And even way past the length of time Raina is supposed to spend with Frankie, she continues to go. And she goes on weekends, evenings, the days that she is not supposed to go, to spend time with her, to learn about her, and to record her story. Now, mind you, we're in 1929, and I think a little after, maybe 1930. We are not that far off from when the Civil War and slavery were, and Frankie Washington is 101. And nobody ever wanted to hear her story. She never talked about herself, but she opened up to Raina because of that connection. Raina has no experience with Black people outside of her maid that they employed before the Great Depression. She learned a little bit about the Civil War and slavery in school, but because of the area they live, and even because of her own mother's prejudices, Raina doesn't know much, doesn't think much about it all until she meets Frankie. And while Raina's mother is very close-minded, Raina's grandmother is not. And there are so many connections that seem impossible, but I accepted it and drank it all in. This book flip-flops in time to when Frankie was a slave and then freed, until present day when this book is taking place. I think it was so interesting to place the book in the time it placed it, but was looking back at slavery and prejudices when it was still a time of prejudices. We still have prejudices, but I just thought it was such a unique premise, and I was drawn to this book because of that. It was only roughly 65 years from the end of slavery to this book, but I felt like it could have been present day. It's hard to describe. I got this book used at a local used bookstore. It was one of those browsing. Something called me under the tulip tree. Just something drew me to it. and I was unfamiliar with the publishing company. I didn't know anything about the author. But this is actually a religious publishing company, and it got extremely heavily religious towards the end of the book. It wasn't off-putting enough for me to say, oh no, I'm done. I was too invested. I wanted to know what happened. But it did throw me off at times when it got extremely heavy. So just a forewarning if you are not into that at all in your books. Anyway, I do recommend Under the Tulip Tree. I think it's very pertinent and just a good story. And next, some quotes. Until next time, happy reading.